What is the most important tool in our spiritual toolkit? Let's break it down. Now more than ever in our times, and I mention this quite a bit in many of my videos, unfortunate and unexpected events. So now more than ever in our times, it's a fact that we experience more unexpected and unfortunate events than our ancestors did 40, 60, 80, 100 years ago. Why is this? Excuse me. With the rise of technology, the first example I'll give is cars and vehicles we drive and the computer systems. There's more of a chance for something to go wrong. And it's popular today that the way cars are produced, and for whatever reason manufacturers, their systems are, there's a lot of recalls on vehicles. So there's that. In our homes, we have more devices that we use, more appliances that we use. You plug them in. And appliances today don't last like they used to. I bet you've had conversations or heard people having conversations about that washer or dryer that your mom had for 50 years. And there's massive amounts of information that we collect on a daily basis. A lot of things we have to remember. So what is the most important tool in our spiritual toolkit? First, I want to talk about how we, let's say, identify ourselves when we're on a spiritual path, a spiritual journey. And a lot of times, this includes daily practices: prayer, meditation, self-examination, self-inquiry. And there are people out there that study what people do on a daily basis, and they may even say that is the task, the routine we have every day with these practices, are they really necessary? I mentioned before, I start my day in silence. And I have periods throughout the day where I sit in silence. I made a video not too long ago. I'll put a link of it in the description box. When is the best time to sit in silence? And in that video I said, not when things are going okay, when everything's okay, although I do that every day. The best time to sit in silence is when we have unexpected or unfortunate events. So, the most important tool in our spiritual toolkit is silence. Silence. What is the typical modus operandi today for people that have an unfortunate or unexpected event? What do? Usually they go on social media. Guess what just happened to me? I can't believe this happened to me. I can't handle this today. Things like this, right? Am I right? I'm finding out the longer I'm on this path, and I'm not on it to attain some type of position. You know, people talk about spiritual awakenings. I do. People talk about enlightenment. I do. People talk about transcending, ascending. I do. A long time ago, I found a description of transcendence that I cling to, and it's described, transcendence is described this way, and this is how I value it. Transcendence is we exist and experience above the normal level. We experience life above how normal people experience it. And we exist and experience above the physical level, the typical physical level. It's deeper than that. That's just the basics. We get to a point where we have this new attitude and outlook on life. Our response is different than it used to be. Actions, reactions, overreactions. This is important because I want to focus on people from the West. I live in the United States. People from the West as opposed to people from the East that live in India, Tibet, those countries. This is the difference. And I mentioned this before. We're not raised in that culture where daily practices, religious or spiritual or both, we don't grow up in that culture that they do in the Far East. Spirituality to them and the practices involved and the attention given to those practices, I could compare it to this. It's as important to them as 4th of July is to us, Easter, Christmas, Memorial Day, Labor Day, just to put it into that perspective. It would be as if we practiced that every day, those holidays. But they practice these they put into practice these spiritual routines every day, lighting incense, praying, devotion, that type of stuff. Actions, that's their actions every day to connect with the divine, the higher power, God, the source, creator of the universe, the All-Father, the Great Spirit, Muhammad, Jesus, etc. So here in the West, we make a decision one day to put these spiritual philosophies and to put these spiritual principles into practice in our lives. And I mentioned that we don't grow up in that type of culture. We're not involved in it from an early age and every day. So here in the West, You may be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, and you decide, okay, I want to try something that seems to work to improve my quality of life. But by that time, there's so much baggage. There's so much baggage. And what's behind that baggage, character defects, flaws, overreacting to situations, our inability to remain calm at all times. So when we make this decision to apply spiritual principles and philosophies to our lives to improve our quality of life, not all of us, but a lot of us need to deal with those things that led to character defects, shortcomings, and flaws. The most important tool in our spiritual toolkit is silence. And finding out, I mentioned this in a video recently, when I talk about this baggage, okay, and the society we live in, and how we're coerced and manipulated by people, groups, corporations. I followed the 12 steps of the 12-step program and cleared away the wreckage of the past. That is, looking at and recognizing how, and in the 4th step, it asks us to make three lists. The resentment list. Who are we resentful at and why, and how did it affect our lives? The fear list. What are we afraid of? And the sex conduct list. We put that down on paper. From that, we go to our spiritual advisor, counselor, priest, rabbi, minister, whoever, and talk about what's on those 3 lists. And we realize and come to know a lot about our character defects and flaws. And I mentioned in that video 2 steps 8 and 9 about making amends to all people we had harmed. Okay. Maybe a lot of people, maybe not so many people, that decide in the West to make this leap into putting spiritual principles and philosophies into action in our lives to improve our quality of life don't have to do that. What I mentioned is in those 12 steps. But for me, it put things into perspective because I learned a lot about myself from those steps. But I also learned a lot about other people, why they reacted toward us the way they did. In that book, I believe it says that we realize that other people are spiritually sick too. So I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about other people, why I react the way I react, why I overreacted the way I did. These resentments and fear and the sex conduct, how that put us in positions that not so good things came out of it. And then going to people and setting things right. And when I get up in the morning, and I talked about this, I have a coffee pot ready. I go in, turn the coffee pot on, get dressed, and I immediately go outside. I immediately go outside first thing in the morning. I know A lot of people in the 12-step program say, well, as soon as I open my eyes, I make conscious contact with God in my bed and say, good morning, God, or something like that. I take some action, okay? I make the first move, you could say, to interact with, let's call it the universe, the divine, the higher power. So I get dressed and I go outside. I'm outside. And I sit for 5 to 10 minutes in silence. At some point, I contemplate my day and I ask myself 4 questions. What do I need to do today? What should I do today? What do I have to do today? What's most important? You could say, I'm creating my day. You could say, I'm preparing myself for the day. And I answer those questions and I come up with ideas. This is important. That's important. This is more important. And I sit in silence again. I come in, I do 1 to 2 hours of pain relief devices. I mentioned this in a video the other day. And then I take my dog out. So while I'm walking my dog, I'm in silence again. I'm not listening to music. I don't have my phone. I'm not that type of person that walks around looking at my phone all the time. So I'm walking my dog in silence. Most times it's in the woods somewhere near here. Silence. What I want to say is I'm finding out these days how important silence is, as opposed to all these other things I used to do all day. I still practice self-inquiry during the day, self-examination. I have a conscience today. I'm aware of everything I do, and if I'm not so kind with somebody, I know it. I know it today. And if I don't set that right immediately, following such a thing, maybe I went to the bank and was upset and said, raised my voice to the teller, things like this. And I realized that later in the day, while I'm sitting in silence, that behavior wasn't up to par. I need to make an apology to that person. And I think about how I'm going to do it. And when I'm done making that apology, I go somewhere and sit in silence. I review the event again. It's in the bank. There was a mistake in my bank statement, so I thought. I got snippy. So after I make the apology, I review that event again and ask myself, what could I have done differently? When things happen to people, unexpected or unfortunate, a lot of people are paranoid. They take this attitude like, somebody did this on purpose to me, or how could this happen to me, or why does this keep happening to me? I said the other day, there's a book out by Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements, and one of the agreements is don't take things personal, and a lot of times we take something personal, like a mistake in a bank statement that turns out to be just a misunderstanding. Nothing bad happened. We take it personal. Instead of overreacting and rushing to the bank, now I'm going through traffic. I almost got that green light. Now it's a red light. I go to pull out and somebody cuts me off. So events happen on our way to the bank when we think we were wronged, and we're more hyper. And maybe we didn't eat. So we're going to the bank. We didn't eat. We experienced these things in our vehicle, and everything intensifies. So maybe, and probably, and for real, the answer is, before we flip out and take off, say over a bank statement, sit in silence. Sit in silence. You don't have to sit there and think, now that I mentioned how this goes, well, did somebody scam me, or why was this withdrawal done and that's not right? Things like this. You just sit there in silence. Just sit there in silence, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Silence is the most important tool in our spiritual toolkit. I had a situation the other day. I got in my car, went to the store, came out of the store, and my car wouldn't start. There was no indication prior to that there was a problem. It was at night. It was under 40 degrees. I looked at my dog. I said, we're not dealing with this now. Let's go home. I went in and told the store, my car won't start. Is okay if I leave the car there? They said, fine. And I walked home. It's like 2 blocks away. And I sat in silence. After about 10 minutes, I said to myself, grab that battery pack, that little box that you can use. You put it on a battery to jumpstart the car. Grab that and go down. You see, that walk home, and then I sat in silence. I collected my thoughts, you could say, in a way, but really, I calmed down enough. And I wasn't upset that the car wouldn't start. I was stunned. Okay, and that's the difference today from practicing silence. I didn't get stressed out. I was stunned that it happened. So I went down with the battery pack. That didn't work. I walked home. I texted my mechanic. It was like 7:40 at night. I said, sorry so late. I don't expect you to do anything now. I explained what happened, and he asked me, are you still at the store? I said, no, I'm at home. He said, I'll come and pick you up in 10 minutes. I didn't expect this. In fact, in the text I mentioned we could check it out tomorrow, something like that. So he picked me up. He had a brand new battery there. So we went down, and he said, turn the lights on and try to start the car. So I expected it to go click like it was. And I got in, and it started right up. So we got to talking about the starter. And I said, was there a trick that you told me to turn the lights on when I tried to start it? Was that the trick that made it start? He said, no, I wanted to see if your lights dimmed, indicating something with the battery. And I already concluded it wasn't the battery, because when I was getting in and out of the car, all the lights were bright. It was fine. Even when it clicked, the lights didn't dim. So he said, go home. When you get up in the morning, I need to take my daughter here, but I'll be available. Tomorrow morning, go out and start the car, or try to start the car, and text me. So around 8:30, I went out. Click. So I texted him, Mike, click. He said, okay. And before he could respond, something told me to try it again. I turned the key and it started right up. So I texted him, it started up. He said, take it down to the shop, leave the key in a box, which I did. And I came back home and sat in silence again. It's the starter. I thought about it. The starter was dragging for a while. Because when I turned that key, that car would fire right up. It would start right up. But the last few months, 6, maybe even more, it's been which puts a strain on the battery, by the way. So I didn't have a car all day yesterday, which I learned something from that. When you have a car, how easy it is to think like, oh, I have 1 roll of paper towels left, and you get in the car and go, just because the car is there. I was pondering not having a car and how my life was different. But I wasn't playing a victim. I think you get the picture. But when I walked home the first time when the car wouldn't start and I told my dog I'm not dealing with this, I sat in silence. Then I went down with that jump pack and it wouldn't start. I came back home and I sat in silence. Texted my mechanic, okay? Before I started the car the next morning, well, I didn't expect it to start. It clicked, but then it started, as I explained. Before that, I was sitting in silence on my deck like I do every morning. Silence is the most important tool in our spiritual toolkit.